5 blocks left, including tonight. This block is an oldie but goodie, an easy block. It is called the double pinwheel. So there aren't a lot of fabrics in this, so this should be done relatively quickly. And I say that with all the blocks, and then it's not so quick. But hopefully we will be able to get this done quickly. Let me angle this just a little bit more so that you're seeing more of this and less of me. So let me tell you about the blocks that we have. I'm using a double pinwheel and I'm using four colors. One I don't count. That's why I was getting ready to say three. This is the background. This is the background that I have used for every block. So every block has this light gray color in it, if you will. And this is there are two of them, 5.5-inch blocks or squares. Then I have one of each of these two batik colors, one in the pink, one in the blue, and these are 7.5-inch. And then I have this burgundy, which is also a 5.5-inch. I will be cutting these on the diagonal to make the blocks. And when I cut them, just to go over a piece of this, there are grains in your fabric. And the grain, the way that your fabric is made, if you will, has a weave. Different threads all woven together. And when you pull on the grain, there is some stretch depending on your fabric, a medium stretch, and then a stretchy stretch. So wherever that stretchy stretch is called the bias. And that's the diagonal. We're on a diagonal. So your threads, when they're woven, are going up and down. On the bias, it has the most amount of stretch, and you can see that pull. So when we cut our fabric, what happens is when we cut on the bias, when we go to sew it, we can pull and stretch. So we need to be careful with that. A suggestion that most people will give is to use some sort of spray starch, and that way your spray starch will help some of the stretchiness. I'm looking at this block and I just want to make sure that this is 5.5 inches square because it looks a little off, and it's just my eyes. So what I'm going to do is stack these. And if you don't feel comfortable stacking them, you can do them individually. But we're going to take our ruler or our square ruler, and we're just going to go from corner to corner. And we're going to cut. So now we have 4 triangles. We're going to do the same thing for this one. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. We are working on a simple block today in part of my May series of making 20 blocks in 20 days. And today's block is the pinwheel block. So most of the blocks blah, 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 have been easy blocks that have taken me no more than a half an hour to do live, with the exception of some of the blocks that were a little bit more, I won't say complicated, but there were more pieces that took me a little longer to put together. So again, from diagonal to diagonal, and I have 4 of each of these colors now. So we're just making simple blocks right now, and then we are going to put those blocks together to make something once we finish them. Once these are all separated, what we are going to do is take them and we can stack them. because these two blocks are going to go together like that. So now we can take these to our machine and we're just going to chain stitch all of these together. Now when I do this, I prefer to match up these corners than to match up the points. So I will take two of these, one in each color, right sides together, line them up, and I will take them to my machine and stitch them. Again, these squares were the smaller of the two. These were 5.5-inch square. Okay. Let me move my quarter thing from there so you don't have to hear that sound. That sounded like that was my machine there for a minute. And we're just going to stitch. And we're going to do the same thing for each of these. So again, these blocks are 5.5-inch square. And the next size blocks that we use are going to be 7.5-inch square. For the white and burgundy, we needed 2 each. For the pink and the blue, we only needed 1 each. We're only making 1 block. Of course, you would need more blocks if you were making more than 1. Going through all of the different blocks, especially if you are a beginner quilter, is a great way to learn new techniques, to practice making your blocks, to decide maybe if there's a block that you really like that you would love to make a whole quilt out of. Quilts can be made out of 1 block that you do over and over and over again. Or you can have 2 blocks, 3 blocks. It depends on the quilt. So sometimes we find that 1 block and then we can put it into a program or we can sketch it out. It's a great way to use AI to figure out if this is something that you want to use. This AI will allow you to create that block over and over and over again. So, shout out to the new generation because old school, we had to draw everything out. Once everything is stitched together, we'll take it to our iron. It hasn't been on in a while, so that red light was on. We're going to move these here. I'm going to let that heat up. And while that heats up, I'm going to take these 2 blocks and line them up because they're going to be the next that I'm going to sew in this series. And this ruler isn't going to work because it is not wide enough. I could still use it, but I have another one over here that is wider. So I'll use this one. And we're just going to go from corner to corner on the diagonal and just cut to separate them. Now there are ways when you are making more than 1 block that you can do this a little differently, but we're just going to follow the traditional way that the pattern was set up. Okay. So our iron now should be nice and hot. You can either press your seams to the dark side by leaving it like this and just folding the dark side over, or you can press them open. I'm just going to press them to the dark side. Again, you're dealing with triangles. You're dealing with the stretchiest part, the bias. So it's real important that you don't iron your fabric. You just want to press it. So just allow that hot iron to sit on top of your fabric and just flatten it. If you move the iron out around a lot, sometimes the fabric will wave on you and then you'll have some inaccurate blocks or units, I should say. And then you're cutting some off or it's too short and it just creates some other problems that you don't need. Okay. So here's the first part of the unit. And then I have these for the second. This is how quick this goes together. And with the thread, just want to get rid of that. So what we're going to do now, taking a pink, and we're going to line that up with the pink. We're going to do the same thing and line up with the blue. And we're going to create these blocks. So these should, if my measurements are right, if my seams work the way they're supposed to, these should line up end to end the way that they should. If there's a little spillage over, I want to make sure that spillage is the same on both sides. And then I can square these up once I finish to the dimension that I need it to be to finish the block. Okay. And I want to make sure that every time I do this, I'm going to have the pink or the blue on the bottom. And the burgundy is going to be the first thing that feeds under my needle. And that's just to make sure that I'm sewing everything and everything will be in the same direction. With batik, it's a little different because both sides tend to look the same, both the front and the back of the fabric, the right side and the wrong side, some people would like to call them. And so you just want to make sure that everything is going the way you want it to go. Otherwise, one of your pinwheels will be going in the wrong direction. And there's nothing more frustrating than to have to rip it out. You don't really have that problem to worry about as much with fabric that is cotton and just a regular print because it only prints on one side. Batik, they're submerging the fabric, and so it'll look the same size. I mean, it'll look the same way front and back. So I can't tell which one is the front, which one is the back. So I just want to make sure that I don't turn this around any kind of funky way, even though it shouldn't happen. And I'm just double checking and triple checking the way that I do it by giving myself a little formula. And that formula is I will have that pink or blue down, and the first thing I feed through is burgundy. There's no pulling of the fabric. It's very important not to pull because remember you're working with the bias by cutting these triangles, so you don't want to stretch and warp that fabric. And here's the last one. And these are like big blocks, or I should say big units, because we're making the quilt block. And the parts of the block are called a unit. But sometimes units can make a block. So we do use them interchangeably, but these are units. And I'm not pulling because I really could pull that fabric to meet the other end, but I don't want to do that. I can square it up. Trim it, so I don't have that problem. Okay, everything is chained together. We're snipping the fabric in between each of those units to separate them. And then this is what this will look like. We'll take it back to our iron and we'll press that open, the seam open. So we want to get everything nice and flat so that we can construct everything together. I am pressing to the bigger triangle in an effort to have everything going in the same direction. So these two are done. And we'll do the next two. again, there's not a lot of pressing that we need to do with this. And thank you again, everyone who is joining me on this journey tonight. We are making a double pinwheel. And this is an easy block that doesn't take a whole lot of effort. So we have these little ends that we can trim off here. This block should be 6.5 inches square. And we can use our rulers to help us to achieve that. So I just want to make sure everything lines up the way it's supposed to. It's a little bit bigger than 6.5. And I'm just going to trim some of this up to get it to be my 6.5. Trying to make sure that the corners go to the corners. Everything should be at 6.5. You want to check twice. And then the block is nice and neat. So I can use this one, and I'll show you it a little differently. So I'm taking the tip of the square and placing it right here on this diagonal. I'm making sure that that diagonal goes through all of those points because I don't have a 45-degree line on this particular square. I could get up and get the one that does. That would be too much like right. And making sure these line up at 6.5. And then I can trim the excess. We'll turn this around and we'll do the same thing to the other side. This time, again, 6.5. Measure twice, cut once. And I'm really and I get quiet when I do this because I'm really looking and paying attention to where everything is. And again, that's because we're not using the best ruler, but sometimes these are the only rulers that people have. So we use what we can and we show that it can work. But I'm going to go get my ruler because it would help for if I were doing more than one of these. So right through those squares, I want to go right through the points on that diagonal. And I'm making sure that I line it up so that it does just that. And then I can trim. Turn this around. I want to get it right to the 6.5. Now this one, I missed the mark on. So I'm going to regret this. But I'll be okay. And I'll show you right here. I'm a little off, but I'll make it work. and I wasn't paying attention as well as I should have. So we'll do this one will be right. So we're just going to come in, and if I'm not loving it, I will absolutely make another square, just to another unit, just to make my life work for me. So I'm trying to make sure that the 6.5 lines up here, which is what I didn't do, and that's why it was a little off. And it may just have been the block, but that's okay, because I will make it work. And these are a little off too, so it is what it is. Okay, these are going to be, if I can get my brain to work right. There we go. Okay, that little thread was peeking through. So here we go. And that's the block. So you can see the pinwheel here, and you can see the pinwheel there. So this is a solid pinwheel, and this is a multicolored pinwheel. This is a 4-patch. So there are 4 units in this block. So whenever I have a 4-patch, I treat it like a 4-patch. I take 2 of the units, turn them onto each other, and then I just take it to my machine, and I'm going to stitch. Line everything up. It should line just about most accurately. I won't say perfect, but it should be accurate, because we trim that to 6.5 inches. We'll do the same thing here. Make sure everything is lined up. And again, we're making the double pinwheel. This is block number 16 for me. I like to double check before I move forward to make sure everything is still in place. If it looks good, we move to the next step. If I switch something around, it's time to rip it and do it again. You can press again if what you've been doing is pressing to one side. You can stay like that. You can open up your seam. It's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and still press these to one side. Since I pressed this way, I'm going to press this one this way. And again, I'm pressing. I'm not ironing. So I'm attempting to get those seams to be flat. It even gives you a nice pinwheel on this side. That seam came up a little bit. It doesn't really bother me, but because I'm admiring the back, I just want that to lay a little bit. But because it's petite, it looks the same on the front that it does on the back. Okay, so we're just going to fold these over onto each other. We're going to nest those seams because we did seams in the opposite directions. So we're just butting them up against each other, and I'm using my fingers to just kind of mush them in place. I clip it just so that I hold it steady. If you hold your fabric, sometimes your seam will be a little off, so it's easier to clip the seams so that you at least make sure the seams line up throughout. Really helps with that final project. Okay, and then we'll hold this one down here. And we're not pulling, we're just holding it straight so that the seams don't come apart. That's all we care about. Okay. Thank you for clicking that like button. If there are additional blocks that you would like to see, please make sure you are subscribing to the channel. Make sure that you are putting on those notifications so you will see the next time that I go live. I'm just pressing again. And then let's open this up. Move this out the way. I left that attached, so I do want to snip that just so it'll allow me to get in here because there's a lot of seams coming all into the same space. So I do want to make sure, if I can, to kind of reduce that bulk a little bit so that this center can flatten out. This is going to be the bulkiest part of the block. So I do want to open this up just to distribute some of that bulk. And it's taking me just a little bit to get the fabric apart so that I can get that iron on there and get it nice and flat from the back. And then I'll turn it over on the front and get it flatter in the front. So I'm just trying to open this up just a little bit. Thank God for nails, because I can hit those nails before I hit my finger, because this iron is hot. And I don't want to burn my fingers if I don't have to. Let's back up a little bit. There we go. And you just really have to pay attention just to make sure that that gets nice and flat. And there may be some folding that has happened on the other side. So that's why we just don't leave it to whatever we did on the back. We flip it over to the front. And then if there are little folds, we can just knock those right out. Now, because I didn't use my ruler, I'll show you right here in the center. Everything didn't line up as neatly as I would have liked it to. Now, part of this is because I could nudge this over a little bit more. If I wanted to go back in here, I could move this over. When I nested this, it didn't nest quite where it should have. So one seam is all the way over here, one seam is all the way over here. If I move this over, it'll change that just a little bit. But for me, I like to make executive decisions. And if I look at it and for me, if it looks good, I'll leave it like this. And it doesn't bother me. It doesn't look like there's an error for me. So I'm okay with this. But a lot of times I will go back in and fix it. Sometimes, and I'll tell you, this is like a pinwheel, like back in the day where it used to be on a stick, right? So if I felt some kind of way about this, depending on what I'm doing, I could use an embellishment and just put a button there, and that would cover up that center. And you would think intentionally I did that. I could use a piece of fabric and applique it over. You would never know. So I can make choices about what I want to do with this if I'm not loving the fact that this didn't line up. But I know it didn't line up just because I can see that my seams were a little bit off. And I knew that when I cut it, I was a little bit off. So those two things are, something that, of course, like with these, this is what I have to work on. When I'm doing things that are very bulky in the center, sometimes my alignment isn't perfect. So me practicing blocks like this gives me a chance to do that. So I could make a whole table runner, practice this blocks a couple more times, and I will absolutely get this better. I could also use a better ruler, which would help me to line that up better. I really thought that I did a good job with it, but I don't like the fact that I'm using a ruler that doesn't have a 45-degree angle coming right out of the corner. For some reason, here's their 45 here. And I'm not sure why it's there. I really don't know. Um, their 30 is here. Their 60 is here. Because when I put the 45 down, right, like it's going to show me that 45, but it's not going to be right at the corner. It's going to be on an angle. And so maybe there's some explanation for that. I don't know. Maybe that's why they were so cheap, because their measurements were off, which is possible. So they printed them wrong. And if somebody just wants to use a straight edge, they have it. I don't know. But anyway, here is the finished block. And so this is the double pinwheel. And again, we used these two fabrics, 5.5 inches, 2 each. So 5.5 inch squares, 2 of them, two lights, 2 darks. And then these 1 each, and these were 7.5 inch. You cut everything on the diagonal and then you assemble. Very simple, very easy, the double pinwheel. So stay tuned, because tomorrow I may do 1 or 2 more blocks, which means that Monday and Tuesday I should be able to finish my 20. I may do a couple more after the 20. I'm going to look at my blocks and decide if I have enough blocks and do I like the blocks that I have to make the projects that I'm thinking about making. If I need additional blocks or some other things, I'll think about it. But this is all about the blocks in the month of May. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Again, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. I would love for you to follow along in this journey, as well as some of the other sewing journeys and quilting journeys that I will have. So I'll see you soon.